Capítulo 1. The Vanishing at Dusk. He was here one moment, and the next, the forest swallowed him whole. Thomas Gray had always been drawn to the Black Hollow Woods, a place locals whispered about in tones that trembled between fear and awe. They said the trees remembered your name, that shadows moved on their own, and that the forest never let go of those it touched. But Thomas didn't care for whispers. He cared for solitude, for the crackle of leaves underfoot, for the way the late afternoon sun carved patterns between the branches. He thought he understood the woods. He was wrong. The day had begun like any other, with Thomas stepping onto the forest trail just as the sun began its slow descent. The air was cool, tinged with the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. Birds flitted between branches, their calls distant, almost strained. There was an unnatural quiet lurking beneath the ordinary sounds of the forest. A pause, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. He reached a clearing where an ancient oak stood alone, its gnarled limbs twisting toward the sky like pleading hands. Thomas paused, notebook in hand, to jot down a sketch. That's when he heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. Not wind, not animal. It called his name, Thomas. He froze. The voice was familiar, yet wrong, hollow. Not his imagination, because the whisper returned louder this time, coaxing him deeper into the trees. The sunlight faded faster than it should have, shadows stretching like liquid over the forest floor. He followed. Minutes, maybe hours, passed, or maybe none at all. Time in the hollow had its own rules. Thomas noticed that the trees grew unnaturally close, their branches entwining overhead until the sky disappeared completely. The whispering persisted, now joined by other voices, snatches of laughter, gasps, even cries. He turned to leave, but the path had vanished. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow mirrored another he'd seen moments before. Then came the chill. Not the coolness of evening, but a bone-deep cold that seemed to seep from the forest itself. His breath came in short, visible bursts, though no frost touched the leaves. And then he saw it. A figure at the edge of the clearing, motionless, yet watching. He stepped forward. It moved, a shadow shifting with intent, mimicking his every motion, as if the forest had grown sentient and had chosen him as prey. The last thing anyone saw was Thomas walking toward the darkness, notebook forgotten, his voice swallowed by the hush of the hollow. The forest seemed to sigh, satisfied, as the shadows closed in, and just like that, he was gone. The townspeople spoke of him in whispers the next day. He was here one moment, they said, and the next, he vanished into the Black Hollow Woods. Nobody had seen him leave, nobody knew why. But all who knew the woods knew one truth. Once the hollow calls, it never forgets. And somewhere deep inside, the forest was already preparing for the next visitor. Capítulo 2's Footprints in the Fog. The fog rolled in like a living thing, thick and clinging, swallowing the forest in a gray haze. No one had seen Thomas Gray since that evening, and the townspeople had begun whispering his name like a spell, half in hope, half in fear. But the search parties found something far stranger than a missing hiker: footprints. They were not ordinary footprints. Human at first glance, yes, but the spacing, the depth, even the angles of the toes were wrong, too long, too sharp. As if someone, or something, had tried to imitate a man but had failed. The footprints began at the edge of the trail and led deep into the heart of Black Hollow Woods, vanishing, reappearing, twisting in ways that made no sense. Detective Harris, a man who prided himself on logic, knelt to examine them. "Someone's playing a trick," he muttered, brushing away the damp leaves. But the air felt charged, electric. The forest seemed to be watching, waiting. Even the birds had gone silent, leaving only the soft hiss of fog against branches. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible. Voices speaking Thomas's name, overlapping and twisting into strange melodies. The searchers exchanged uneasy glances, each step heavier than the last. Something was guiding them, or luring them. As they followed the prints, the forest grew darker, though the sun had not yet set. The trees leaned in as though trying to see them better, their gnarled branches scraping against one another in the fog. Shapes flitted just beyond vision. a shadow darting between trunks, a glimmer of movement that vanished the instant anyone looked directly at it. "Stay together," Harris ordered, though even his voice shook. The footprints led to a shallow ravine where the fog pooled like water, and there, partially hidden beneath moss and fallen leaves, they found the first clue: Thomas's notebook. Its pages were wet, smeared with strange, dark stains that looked like ink but shimmered unnaturally. Symbols scrawled across the paper made no sense, yet seemed to pulse with a rhythm that resonated deep in the chest of anyone who looked at them. A sudden chill cut through the group, making their teeth chatter. One of the searchers, a young woman named Lila, pointed toward the fog. "Something's out there," she whispered, her eyes wide. A shadow moved, gliding over the moss as though it were weightless. And then, just like that, the footprints resumed, continuing past the ravine into even denser fog, leading into the forest's heart where no sunlight ever reached. Harris hesitated. Logic screamed to turn back, but instinct, that irrational sense that something had to be done, pushed him forward. Each step was a negotiation with fear, and the forest, it seemed, was patient. It allowed them just enough progress to feel safe, before the whispers came again, louder now, echoing off invisible walls, as if the woods themselves were speaking in a language older than humanity. The fog thickened until the searchers could barely see their own hands. Somewhere ahead, Thomas's voice, or something that sounded like it, called out, "Follow me." And with that single, haunting invitation, the group vanished deeper into the hollow, leaving the world behind, unaware that the forest had already decided which of them it would keep and which it would let go. Capítulo 3. Whispers between trees. Sometimes the trees speak, and they never lie. The fog had not lifted. It clung to the black hollow woods like a living veil, distorting shapes, swallowing sound, and twisting perception. Detective Harris and his search party had been walking for hours, or perhaps only minutes. Time lost meaning in this place. The footprints led on, yet with every step, the forest seemed to reshape itself, branches bending to block their path, shadows shifting just out of reach. Then came the whispers, at first faint, almost like the rustle of leaves, but soon they became clearer, voices calling their names. Thomas's name. Thomas. They seemed to seep from the very bark of the trees, vibrating through the air, curling around their ankles, rising into their ears until it felt as though the forest itself was breathing. Lila's hand shot out, gripping Harris's arm. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, eyes wide and wet with fear. They're saying things only we would understand." He did hear it. Not words in any language, yet unmistakably intelligible. Confessions, fears, even secrets he had buried so deeply he thought the world had forgotten them. The forest wasn't just alive, it was watching, judging, learning, and it hungered for more. A shadow flickered among the trunks. Harris froze. The group held their breath. In that instant, the fog seemed to condense, curling into forms that resembled the missing, the lost, and the damned. Each whisper became a chorus, overlapping voices of those who had vanished here before Thomas, voices that promised knowledge, power, salvation, and something far darker. The path vanished beneath their feet. They had been following the footprints, yet now the forest offered nothing but gnarled roots and endless fog. Harris cursed under his breath, panic clawing at him, and then he noticed it. A small, almost imperceptible movement at eye level, a branch twisting unnaturally, revealing Thomas's notebook again, wedged in the crook of a tree. Lila reached for it, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening chorus. She screamed, clutching the notebook to her chest as words seemed to seep from the pages themselves, swirling into the fog in luminous, crawling scripts. Thomas's handwriting. But it was wrong, jagged, alien. A warning or an invitation? The forest offered no explanation, only whispers. A cold wind swept through the hollow, carrying with it a scent of damp earth, decay, and something else. Something alive. The shadows moved closer, circling, pressing in, yet never touching. Each step they took forward felt heavier than the last, as if invisible hands weighed them down. Harris finally spoke, voice trembling. "We need to leave, now." But the forest was patient. It had already decided that leaving was not an option. The whispers grew urgent, almost pleading, urging the searchers deeper into its heart. "Come closer. See what he became." And then they saw it, a figure in the distance, half hidden by fog, standing unnaturally still. Thomas, or something that looked like Thomas. Eyes empty yet burning, mouth moving in silent whispers that the forest amplified into their minds. No one spoke. No one moved. The trees watched, waiting. And somewhere between the whispers and the fog, the Black Hollow Woods claimed its next secret. Capítulo 4, the cabin that moved. It wasn't where it should have been, but somehow it was always watching. The search party had stumbled into a part of Black Hollow Woods that few dared enter. The fog clung to the underbrush like a shroud, dampening sound and light, twisting the trees into grotesque shapes. And then, as if it had always been there, the cabin appeared. Small, wooden, decrepit, yet somehow alive. Detective Harris approached cautiously, notebook clutched tightly. The air grew colder with every step, the fog thickening, swirling around the cabin like smoke. "It's empty," one of the searchers muttered. But even as the words left her lips, the forest seemed to laugh, a soft, hollow rustling through the branches that made the hairs on their necks rise. They stepped inside. Dust hung in the air, and the scent of decay was faint but unmistakable. The furniture had been moved, chairs tipped, papers scattered. But when they returned outside, the cabin was gone. No trace remained, only the faint imprint of its foundation, quickly swallowed by moss and roots. Then it appeared again, 100 yards away in the same clearing, or was it the same clearing? The cabin had shifted, as if the forest itself had placed it just out of reach, teasing them. Harris's pulse quickened. He knew no structure could move on its own. Yet the fog seemed to bend around it, almost protective, almost sentient. They entered again, and this time the inside had changed. The furniture, the walls, even the floorboards bore new marks, scratches that spelled Thomas's name, though no hand could have carved them. A fireplace, cold and empty, suddenly exhaled a faint heat, and the shadows inside began to stretch unnaturally, reaching toward them. Lila picked up a small wooden figurine from the mantel. It resembled Thomas, an almost perfect miniature, but its eyes were hollow. She felt the fog pressing in, whispering, murmuring secrets she could almost understand. Every nerve in her body screamed to drop it, but curiosity, that fatal human flaw, kept her frozen. A soft creak echoed through the cabin, and the door slammed shut on its own. Panic surged. The shadows shifted, gathering into a mass, forming shapes that resembled long-lost hikers, the vanished townspeople, all staring with empty eyes. Harris tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. The cabin had become something else, something alive, breathing and hungry for the living. Then the walls whispered, not words, but memories. Each of them felt an intimate fear, a regret, a secret laid bare. The cabin knew them. It remembered them, and the forest outside laughed again, a wet, hungry sound, as if it were pleased with the fear they produced. By the time they finally forced the door open, the fog had swallowed the cabin once more. They looked around the clearing, hearts hammering, only to find the cabin had reappeared 50 yards to the left, intact and waiting. Harris realized the horrifying truth. The cabin was not stationary, and neither was the forest. Both were watching, following, shaping reality to lure them in deeper. Thomas had vanished here, yes, but the cabin, the shadows, and the whispers, they were only the beginning. And somewhere, deep in the Black Hollow Woods, something was waiting to welcome him back. Capítulo 5, Shadows that Remember. A shadow lingered, long after the man was gone. The searchers had learned to fear the fog, but it was the shadows that unsettled them most. In Black Hollow Woods, darkness was not merely the absence of light. It was a presence, patient, calculating, and strangely intelligent. Wherever Thomas had walked, it seemed, the shadows remembered. Harris noticed it first. One evening, as the team camped near the edge of a clearing, he saw movement in the corner of his eye. A shadow detached itself from a twisted oak, slithering across the ground as if it had a mind of its own. He turned sharply. Nothing. Only fog and silence. "Did you see that?" he asked, voice low. Lila shook her head, eyes wide. It was just a trick of the fog. But deep down she knew it wasn't. The shadows grew bolder as night fell. They twisted around the trees, creeping along the ground, mimicking movements, even voices. From the corner of their vision, the team glimpsed figures, familiar faces, distorted, staring with empty eyes. Every shadow seemed to remember Thomas. Every rustle of leaves whispered fragments of his last moments. Fear, desperation, final pleas swallowed by the woods. At one point, Lila stepped too close to a thicket. A shadow lunged toward her, stretching impossibly, yet she felt no touch. Instead, a memory not her own flooded her mind. Thomas kneeling, whispering into the fog, begging for something she couldn't understand. She stumbled back, trembling, realizing that the forest didn't merely trap bodies, it trapped souls, echoes, memories. Harris tried to keep the group together, but the shadows had already begun their work. They separated, weaving between trees, reshaping the woods in subtle, sinister ways. Paths that were clear one moment became twisted the next. Familiar landmarks vanished or appeared where they didn't belong. The forest was learning them, reading them, shaping them. Then came the whispers, not Thomas's voice this time, but many. A chorus of those lost to the hollow, layered upon one another, rising and falling like a tide. "Do you remember him?" it asked, though no lips moved. The question was not for them. It was for the shadows themselves, and perhaps for the forest that bore them. The fog thickened. The shadows merged into an undulating mass, moving with intent. Harris caught a glimpse of something terrifying. Thomas's face, pale and hollow-eyed, reflected in a shadow that shouldn't exist. It mimicked his gestures perfectly, yet there was a malign intelligence behind those empty eyes. "Stay close," Harris barked, though he had no certainty it would help. They moved as one, but the shadows followed, always a step behind, learning, remembering, growing hungrier. Every footstep echoed longer than it should have, and every whisper seemed to cling to their skin like wet leaves. By dawn, the searchers realized the truth. The shadows were not merely extensions of the forest, they were its memory. And they remembered Thomas. Soon they would remember the searchers too. The hollow never forgot. Capítulo 6, the Journal of Silence. Every word he wrote felt like it was written by someone else, or something else. The discovery of Thomas Gray's journal came unexpectedly. Wedged between the roots of a moss-covered oak, it seemed almost deliberate. Its leather cover was weathered, edges frayed, yet it emanated a weight, a presence that made the hairs on Lila's arms rise. She opened it, and the forest seemed to inhale. The pages were filled with neat, flowing handwriting. Thomas's handwriting, but wrong. Jagged symbols crawled along margins, ink shimmering faintly, as if alive. The words shifted beneath her gaze, sentences reforming when she blinked. What was once a note on hiking trails became a warning, a plea, a prophecy. He was trying to tell us something, Lila whispered, turning the page with trembling fingers. Harris bent over her shoulder, eyes scanning lines that made no logical sense, yet carried an undeniable urgency. "Do not follow me. Do not trust the hollow. It hears your every thought." The journal revealed fragments of Thomas's descent into obsession, his encounters with the forest's unnatural intelligence, and the whispers that promised knowledge but demanded allegiance. Some entries were written in haste, ink smudged by trembling hands. Others were precise, almost ritualistic, describing the patterns of the fog, the movement of shadows, the way the forest seemed to shift reality itself. A page fluttered, revealing a diagram of the cabin. Not the cabin they had seen, but one that moved, changed shape, and seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Symbols surrounding it pulsed faintly, like they were breathing. The journal was no ordinary record. It was a map, a guide, a warning all in one. Lila shivered. He wasn't just lost, she said. He was being taught by the woods, or by something in it. Harris frowned. The hairs on his neck prickled. He could almost hear the forest listening, eager, waiting. The journal didn't merely describe the hollow. It seemed to communicate with it. Every sentence carried a resonance, a vibration that made the edges of their vision blur. It was as if reading Thomas's words had unlocked a tiny doorway, and the forest was peering through. Footsteps, faint, deliberate, not quite human. They weren't alone. The shadows shifted at the periphery of the fog, drawn to the journal, or perhaps to the knowledge it contained. Lila clutched it tighter, feeling a presence pressing at her mind, coaxing her to read further, to obey. Harris grabbed her shoulder. "We take it. We leave. Now." But the journal resisted. Its pages turned of their own accord, revealing entries that hadn't existed moments before. Dark sketches, twisted faces, whispers transcribed in a language older than any living soul. The forest outside seemed to lean closer, listening, hungry. And in that silence, heavier than any sound, the truth became clear. Thomas had written nothing. The hollow had. Every word, every symbol, every warning. It was alive, and it remembered Thomas, and it would remember them too. The woods were patient, but the hollow never forgave. Capítulo 7. Echoes in the stream. The water whispered secrets no one should hear. The search party stumbled upon a narrow stream, its surface smooth and black, reflecting the twisted trees like a dark mirror. The forest was quieter here, almost expectant, as though it had led them to this place for a purpose. Lila knelt by the water, her fingers hovering above its surface. A faint ripple responded to her touch, though the wind was still. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, tilting her head. The stream seemed to answer. At first a faint murmur, like the trickle of water over stones, but then words began to form, carried in the rhythm of the current. "Thomas, come back, the hollow waits." The voice was unmistakable. Thomas' voice, pleading, fragmented, desperate. Harris stepped forward, cautious. The water's surface shimmered unnaturally, reflecting not their faces, but visions. Glimpses of Thomas wandering deeper into the fog, shadows curling around him, the cabin moving silently behind. Each image lasted a heartbeat before vanishing, replaced by another, a figure in the trees, watching, waiting. This isn't possible," Harris muttered. "It's a stream. It shouldn't." But logic held no power here. The water moved in patterns that defied reality, circling around rocks as though it had intention. Lila reached closer, and the voices grew louder, overlapping into a chorus of pleas, warnings, and cries of those who had vanished before. The stream did not just repeat their words, it remembered them. It echoed their fears, their regrets, their unspoken secrets. A cold wind blew, sending ripples across the water. The reflections warped, showing not only Thomas but also the searchers themselves, twisted, trapped, shadows replacing flesh. Every ripple was a warning, every whisper a promise. The hollow was patient. It had time, and it hungered for more. Lila recoiled, but the journal she carried pulsed faintly in her hands. The pages seemed to vibrate in resonance with the stream. Symbols glimmered briefly on the edges, as if guiding her, or perhaps trapping her. Harris noticed that the stream seemed to respond to the journal, ripples forming patterns that resembled the diagrams inside. The forest wasn't passive, it was orchestrating, directing, and listening. Then came the sound of footsteps behind them, not from the stream, not from the fog, but the forest itself pressing closer. Shadows moved along the banks, circling, elongating. And from the water, Thomas's voice rose again, louder, almost urgent. "Don't follow. You'll never leave." A scream split the silence as Lila stepped back, losing her footing. The water rose slightly, unnaturally, spilling over the edges, as if the stream itself were reaching for her. Harris grabbed her, pulling her away, but the echo of Thomas's voice followed them, embedding itself in their minds, replaying over and over, fragments of fear, despair, and a truth too terrible to ignore. By the time they moved beyond the stream, the water had returned to its calm state, as if nothing had happened. Yet the echoes lingered, etched into memory. The forest had spoken, and its words were not merely warnings, they were invitations. And somewhere downstream the hollow waited, patient, hungry, remembering everything. Capítulo 8. The Stranger Among Us. He looked like Thomas, but his eyes weren't human. The town had been restless since Thomas Gray vanished. Every shadow seemed suspect, every stranger watched with a subtle menace. And then he appeared, walking down the main street as if he had always been there. Same height, same gait, same clothes, but something was off. Something that made the hairs on Lila's neck stand on end. Harris caught sight of him first. "It can't be," he murmured, voice tight. His instincts screamed that this was Thomas, but instinct in Black Hollow Woods was a dangerous thing. The stranger smiled, and it was the wrong smile, too wide, too knowing. It wasn't the smile of a man returning home. It was the smile of someone who had seen the forest in ways the living should not. Lila's stomach churned as she stepped closer, drawn by a mix of fear and recognition. "Thomas?" she asked, though her voice trembled. He tilted his head, studying her with eyes that glimmered unnaturally in the fading light. They were the same color, same shape, but hollow, blackened at the edges, as though the forest itself had claimed them. Then he whispered her name, not with warmth, not with familiarity, but with the cold precision of something that knew her thoughts before she had spoken them. Harris moved to intervene. "Stay back," he ordered, but the stranger didn't move. Instead, he raised a hand, and the wind seemed to shift around him, stirring leaves in impossible patterns. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, crawling along the ground like liquid. The town square, familiar just moments ago, warped under the fog and the dimming light, as though reality itself responded to his presence. "You shouldn't have come here," the stranger said, voice calm but edged with menace. "The hollow doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive." Lila felt a wave of memories not her own. The forest, the stream, the cabin, all alive, all watching. And Thomas. Thomas trapped, twisted, a reflection of the forest's hunger. Her pulse raced. The stranger moved closer, and for a brief moment, she swore she saw Thomas's face flicker behind the hollow mask. The townspeople began whispering. Windows closed quickly, doors bolted. None of them had seen Thomas in years, yet here he was, or something claiming to be him, and the forest seemed to follow. Every shadow aligned toward him, every echo carried his voice. Harris stepped forward, heart hammering. What are you?" The stranger smiled again, tilting his head toward the forest. "I am what the woods made him, and soon it will make more of you." A chill ran through the town, as if the Black Hollow Woods itself had reached across the miles. The stranger's presence was not just ominous. It was a breach, a warning, a promise. And then, without another word, he vanished into the mist, leaving only the echoes of Thomas's voice lingering in the ears of those who dared remember. The town was silent, too silent. The forest had sent its emissary, and the shadows that followed promised that the hollow's hunger was far from satisfied. Somewhere deep inside, Thomas, if it was truly him, was already a stranger to himself. Capítulo 9. Rituals in the dark. The forest held secrets that should never be spoken aloud. Night had fallen over Black Hollow Woods, thick and suffocating, yet strangely vibrant. The fog twisted among the trees, curling like smoke, concealing shapes that seemed too deliberate to be mere branches. The searchers followed the faint glow of lanterns, the eerie illumination revealing symbols etched into the ground, circles, runes, patterns that pulsed faintly as if alive. "They're rituals," Lila whispered, voice barely audible over the whispering wind. Her fingers traced one of the runes on the damp earth, and a shiver ran down her spine. "Thomas, he must have been drawn here for a reason." Harris frowned, stepping cautiously. "Or forced. Something doesn't want us here, but it wants him. And maybe the rest of us too." The clearing opened up before them, revealing a stone altar, ancient and slick with moss. Around it, the forest seemed to lean closer, branches intertwining like grasping hands. Shadows twisted unnaturally on the ground, forming shapes that resembled figures kneeling in devotion or despair. And at the center of the altar, faint scratches glimmered in the lantern light. Thomas's name carved repeatedly, as if both warning and invocation. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the lanterns, plunging them into darkness. Only the faint glow from the runes remained, pulsating like a heartbeat. And then, the whispers returned. Not just Thomas's voice this time, but many voices chanting in unison, layered and unending. They spoke a language older than memory, a rhythm that seemed to pulse inside their chests. Lila's hands shook as she opened the journal, the pages glowing faintly in the darkness. The ritual was recorded there, but the handwriting shifted before her eyes, symbols twisting into new forms. The forest was alive, reading, rewriting. Every word on the page resonated with the shadows around them. A figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, not Thomas, but a distorted silhouette, shifting, its edges fraying into darkness. It moved with the precision of something trained, something sentient, chanting the rituals Thomas had recorded. The shadows around it responded, curling, undulating, almost breathing with intent. Harris tried to shout, but the air thickened, compressing sound. Lila felt the journal tug in her hands, guiding her. The forest wasn't merely observing, it was instructing, bending reality, feeding on fear and obedience. The ritual intensified. Symbols etched into the soil began to glow brighter, the shadows stretching, twisting around the searchers, shaping them into images of Thomas's descent. And in the heart of the darkness, a voice whispered, sharp and commanding, "To survive, you must remember and obey." Lila looked up. The figure's face flickered. Thomas's face, but eyes black as void stared back. Every heartbeat in the clearing echoed like a drum. The ritual wasn't over, and the forest had chosen its audience. By dawn, the clearing was silent, the fog retreating like nothing had occurred. The runes faded, the altar returned to moss-covered stone, and yet, in the minds of those who had witnessed it, the chant lingered. The hollow had begun its teaching, and those who listened closely might never leave. Capítulo 10. The Marked Tree. Some trees remember everything. The fog clung to black hollow woods like a living veil, wrapping the forest in silence. The search party moved cautiously, following a trail Thomas had once walked, or thought he had walked. It led them to a massive oak, its trunk scarred with deep grooves that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. This was no ordinary tree. The bark bore marks that resembled Thomas's handwriting, etched with precision no human hand could achieve under normal circumstances. This is it," Lila whispered, stepping closer. She traced the grooves with trembling fingers, feeling the vibrations beneath her skin. "He left something here." Harris surveyed the tree, unease coiling in his chest. "It's a message or a warning. Either way, it's alive in some sense." The markings were not static. As they watched, the lines shifted subtly, forming new patterns, symbols, and even faces twisted in fear, despair, and longing. A chill swept through the clearing, carrying the faint scent of moss, decay, and something metallic. The forest seemed to hum, responding to their presence. Then came the whisper, not a voice from the fog, not Thomas's voice, but something deeper, older. "Remember, or become forgotten." It resonated through the marrow of their bones. Lila felt the journal in her hands tugging toward the tree. She opened it, and the symbols inside glimmered faintly, forming a path that led directly to the tree's heart. As she followed the guidance, the shadows stretched and writhed. The clearing seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, shadows whispering secrets only she could hear. Thomas's fears, his discoveries, his last moments. The tree was a sentinel, a keeper of memory, a monument to the forest's power, and it remembered Thomas in ways that were terrifyingly intimate. Harris stepped forward, trying to touch the trunk, but the moment his fingers brushed the bark, a vision struck him. He saw Thomas kneeling beneath the tree, chanting in a language older than humanity. Shadows twisted around him, lifting him from the ground. The forest watched, patient and omniscient, recording every heartbeat, every whispered plea. Harris stumbled back, gasping. "It's alive," he said. Lila felt herself drawn closer, compelled by the journal and the tree's subtle pull. The markings formed new patterns, showing paths, hidden clearings, and symbols she didn't recognize but somehow understood. The forest wasn't just watching. They were participating, guiding, demanding that she see what Thomas had seen. And then the shadows coalesced around the tree, dark and solid, forming a figure. Thomas. Or a shadow that was Thomas, hollow-eyed, yet unmistakably alive in its unnatural way. He extended a hand toward her, and the tree shivered, as though responding to an unspoken command. "Come," the figure whispered, voice echoing with every lost soul the hollow had claimed. "See what the forest remembers." The fog thickened, the shadows pressed closer, and Lila realized the horrifying truth. The marked tree remembered everything, every step, every word, every secret of those who entered the hollow. And it was not done remembering. The forest had chosen its witness. Capítulo 11, the Forgotten Path. Some roads exist only to trap you. After discovering the marked tree, the search party hesitated to continue. The forest felt heavier, more conscious, as if it had noticed their intrusion and was rearranging itself to test them. Then Lila noticed a narrow trail curling away from the clearing. almost invisible beneath the fallen leaves and fog. It hadn't been on any map. It hadn't been described in Thomas's journal. It was forgotten. "This must be it," she whispered, her voice tight. "The path he took before he disappeared." Harris frowned. "Or the path the Hollow wants us to take." The moment they stepped onto the trail, the forest shifted. The fog thickened and the trees leaned closer, branches creaking like bones. Each step forward felt heavier than the last. Sounds from the outside world, the wind, the birds, vanished entirely. Even their breathing seemed swallowed by the dense air. Then came the whispers, faint at first, almost polite, but growing insistent. Turn back, follow." They seemed to emanate from the ground itself, echoing through roots and soil. Yet the trail beckoned, lined with subtle symbols carved into bark, stones, and moss. Thomas's journal pulsed faintly in Lila's hands, guiding her along the twisted route. The deeper they walked, the more the forest became a maze. Landmarks shifted, clearings disappeared and reappeared. Shadows darted at the edge of their vision, fleeting but deliberate. And sometimes, when the fog parted just enough, they saw figures standing between the trees, tall, thin, utterly still, faces obscured, watching, judging. Harris swallowed hard. "It's testing us," he said. "This path, it wants to know why we're here." Lila nodded, gripping the journal. Every symbol, every whisper, every distorted shadow made her heart pound. She began to notice that some whispers weren't coming from the forest. They were inside her head, memories not her own. Fear, regret, anguish, moments of Thomas's life, his thoughts, his terror. The trail split in a way that shouldn't have been possible. One branch led to a sunlit clearing, almost welcoming. The other into a dark, twisting corridor where shadows seemed to breathe. The choice was impossible. Every instinct screamed that one path led to safety, the other to oblivion. But the Hollow didn't care about instincts. It wanted obedience. Lila felt the journal tug her toward the dark corridor. Harris hesitated. "We shouldn't..." But before he could finish, the forest acted. Branches whipped out, closing the path behind them, and the fog thickened into a living wall. The shadows shifted, stretching to block retreat. The forgotten path had claimed them. Voices, Thomas's voice and others, layered into an unending chorus, filled their minds. Follow, learn, or become forgotten. The searchers pressed forward, hearts pounding, unsure if the path would lead to Thomas or to the Hollow's next victims. Every step was a negotiation with fear, every heartbeat a reminder. The forest never forgets, and it never forgives. And somewhere ahead, beyond fog and shadow, the path awaited their surrender. Capítulo 12. The Eye in the Fog. Something was watching, always watching. The forgotten path had grown narrower, the fog thicker, curling around the trees like living smoke. The searchers moved in tense silence, each step echoing unnaturally against the hollow trunks. Every rustle, every crack of a branch set their nerves on edge. And then, they saw it. A single eye floating in the mist, large, unblinking, impossibly detailed. Its color shifted subtly, green, amber, black, reflecting the deepest fears of anyone who dared look. It hovered at the edge of their vision, never fully revealed, yet impossible to ignore. Lila's breath caught. "It's watching us," she whispered. Her hand shook as she clutched Thomas's journal. The pages trembled, resonating with the presence of the eye. Symbols glimmered faintly, forming words she couldn't read aloud, yet understood perfectly. "Do not stray. Do not fail." Harris swallowed hard, feeling a primal fear grip him. "It's not Thomas," he muttered, though even he didn't fully believe it. "Whatever's out there, it's something else." The eye moved, drifting between trees, always keeping them in its gaze. And with it came whispers, soft at first, then layering over one another until they became a chorus of terror. Voices of the lost, voices of those who had vanished in the hollow. Thomas's voice emerged from the rest, distorted, pleading, "Don't follow. It sees everything." Shadows twisted beneath the fog, stretching unnaturally, aligning themselves toward the eye. Every shadow seemed to remember Thomas. Every branch seemed to lean toward the watchers. Every rustle carried intent. The forest itself had become a conduit, a lens through which the eye saw, calculated, and judged. Lila stepped forward despite herself, compelled by the journal. Each step toward the eye made the fog churn, thickening, wrapping her legs, coiling like hands made of mist. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, and with every beat the eye seemed to grow larger, closer, knowing more. Suddenly, the fog parted for a moment, revealing Thomas, or the creature that had once been him. Hollow-eyed, body twisted unnaturally, yet unmistakably familiar. His gaze locked onto Lila, and she felt the pull of something powerful, commanding, impossible to resist. Harris grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "We have to move!" But even as they retreated, the shadows and the eye followed, stretching, twisting, shaping the fog into forms that spoke silently to their fears. The forest had learned them. It remembered Thomas, and now it remembered them too. A low hum rose from the ground, vibrating through the soles of their feet, through the marrow of their bones. The eye pulsed, a heartbeat in the fog, measuring, waiting. One misstep, one lapse in courage, and the hollow would claim them, not as bodies, but as memories, whispers, shadows. By the time they reached the next clearing, the eye had vanished, but its presence lingered, a mark burned into the mind. The forest had shown them that watching was enough. And somewhere in the fog, Thomas, lost, twisted, changed, remained, waiting. The hollow never slept, and it never forgot. Capítulo 3: The Whispering Stones. The forest held voices older than memory. After escaping the eye in the fog, the searchers stumbled upon a small clearing where the ground was dotted with stones, black as obsidian, each etched with runes that glimmered faintly even in the dim light. They hummed softly, a vibration that seemed to seep into the bones, resonating with memories they hadn't lived, or perhaps had forgotten. Lila knelt beside one, brushing the surface with her fingers. A whisper slipped into her mind, unintelligible yet undeniably a voice. Old, patient, and dangerous. It carried a warning, a secret, a fragment of Thomas's last thoughts. The journal trembled in her lap, reacting to the stones. Each rune corresponded to a line in Thomas's entries, forming a map of knowledge and dread. Harris frowned. These are markers, messages. But from who? Thomas? Or the forest itself? The shadows began to shift among the stones, stretching, writhing, and forming humanoid shapes. Faces appeared briefly in the darkness. Faces of those who had vanished, their expressions locked in eternal terror. The forest had grown impatient, eager to remind them that nothing in Black Hollow was accidental. A low chant began, barely audible, rising from the stones themselves. The words weren't human. They carried a resonance older than the trees. Lila felt it in her chest, vibrating with her heartbeat. The whispers layered over the chant, fragments of warnings, memories, and secrets of the Hollow's victims. She realized the stones weren't just stones. They were conduits, vessels storing the echoes of the lost, feeding on fear and memory alike. Harris reached for one, trembling. As his hand touched it, a vision erupted. Thomas, kneeling before the stones, tracing the runes with his fingertips. Shadows wrapped around him, guiding, controlling, consuming. He whispered words in the same language, pleading for understanding, for escape. And then, one by one, the shadows vanished, leaving only the imprint of memory embedded in the stones. Lila turned a stone over in her hands, and the whispers sharpened. It spoke directly to her, not in sound, but in thought. Remember him. Remember what is done here. Obey, or be forgotten. The line between memory and prophecy blurred. Every word in the journal, every shadow in the forest, every flicker of the fog converged in that instant. The Hollow was teaching, shaping, commanding. Harris tugged at her arm. "We need to leave, now!" But the stones hummed louder, resonating with the fog, the trees, and the shadows. They weren't just watching, they were alive, aware, recording every heartbeat, every fear. As they scrambled back onto the path, the whispering intensified, following them, echoing inside their heads long after the stones were out of sight. The forest had spoken again, revealing secrets it should have buried, and they had no choice but to obey, or be claimed. Somewhere, deeper in the hollow, Thomas's presence lingered among the stones, watching, waiting, and remembering everything. The forest never forgot, and it never forgave. Capítulo 14: The Hollow's Offering. The forest demanded a price. The path led them deeper into black hollow woods, where the fog thickened into an almost tangible wall. Every step seemed heavier than the last, weighed down by an unseen force. Shadows moved unnaturally, curling around their feet, pressing them forward. And ahead, a clearing opened, a place that smelled of damp earth and something metallic, ancient, predatory. At the center stood a stone basin, black and polished, filled with water that reflected not their faces, but their fears. The air pulsed with energy, vibrating in time with their heartbeats. Lila's journal trembled violently in her hands, its pages turning as if alive. Symbols glowed, pointing toward the basin. "They want something," Lila whispered, eyes wide. "The hollow always takes a toll." From the fog emerged a figure, not Thomas, not fully human. Shadows clung to him like tattered robes. His eyes glimmered with hollow intelligence, and his voice carried both command and invitation. "The forest remembers everything. Offer what is yours, and perhaps you may leave." Harris stepped forward instinctively. "What do we offer? What does it want?" The figure raised a hand, and the water in the basin rippled unnaturally. Faces emerged, lost travelers, their expressions twisted in terror, mouths moving as if trying to speak. Lila realized with horror that the hollow demanded not just fear, but memory, sacrifice, a piece of themselves. The shadows shifted closer, responding to hesitation. Every heartbeat, every whispered doubt fed the clearing. Lila felt the journal tug toward the basin, guiding her. She saw visions. Thomas kneeling here, offering his thoughts, his regrets, his will to survive, and being reshaped by the forest's power. "You must choose," the figure intoned. "Obedience or oblivion, memory or consumption." Harris glanced at Lila, panic in his eyes. We can't give it ourselves." But the hollow didn't negotiate. Shadows formed hands, stretching toward them, tugging at their limbs. The fog thickened, whispering promises of knowledge and power, and threats of eternal entrapment. Lila realized that the forest wasn't just testing them, it was assimilating, feeding, reshaping reality. With trembling hands, Lila placed the journal in the basin. The water rose, rippling, swallowing the book, and the whispers intensified, twisting around her mind. Images of Thomas, of shadows, of the hollow's endless hunger flooded her consciousness. She understood then that survival required submission, not of body, but of will. The shadows receded slightly, the fog thinning, and the figure stepped back. The basin settled, calm again, but the weight of what had been offered lingered. The hollow had taken their knowledge, their fear, a piece of their very selves, and in return, it allowed them passage. For now. As they left the clearing, the forest seemed to hum, satisfied yet patient. The hollow had received its offering, and somewhere deeper in the woods, Thomas, twisted and changed, watched, waiting for the next price to be paid. The forest never slept, it never forgave, and it never forgot. Capítulo 15, The Vanishing Point. All paths lead to the same truth. Some things are never meant to be found. The forest loomed like a living entity, dense fog curling around gnarled trees. Lila and Harris had reached the edge of their endurance. Every nerve taut, every heartbeat echoing the whispers of the hollow. The journal, worn and pulsing faintly, guided them to the vanishing point, a place Thomas had written of but never survived. The clearing opened like a wound in the forest. Shadows danced around the perimeter, twisting, elongating, forming grotesque shapes that watched their every movement. At its center stood a stone arch, covered in runes that glimmered faintly like embers. The air vibrated with energy, carrying voices, some human, some not, threads of memory stitched into the fog. Lila stepped forward, drawn as if by gravity. This is where Thomas ended," she whispered. Her fingers brushed the arch, and a wave of vision swept through her. Thomas kneeling, offering his soul to the forest, shadows consuming his form. The journal pulsing as if alive. The hollow remembered everything. Harris grabbed her arm. "We don't know what waits inside, But the hollow didn't wait. The shadows surged, flowing like liquid around their feet, reaching, probing, whispering in voices older than the trees. And then, a figure emerged from the fog. Thomas, or what he had become. Hollow-eyed, twisted, a shadow of his former self, yet unmistakably alive in some unnatural way. "You've come," the figure murmured, voice layered with his own and the forest's indistinguishable. "The forest remembers. It will remember you too." The journal leapt from Lila's hands, pages flipping rapidly. The symbols glowed, forming a map, but not of location. A map of survival, of choices, of the cost of knowledge. The hollow demanded more than courage. It demanded recognition, submission, understanding of fear itself. Harris stepped forward, defiant. "We won't be part of this, whatever this is." The shadows laughed, an unholy chorus of those who had vanished. The fog thickened, compressing the clearing into a world apart. Every heartbeat, every thought, every memory seemed to resonate with the hollow's will. And then the air split with a scream, Thomas's scream, echoing into infinity. The figure reached out, and Lila felt herself drawn forward, the journal glowing brighter with each step. For a moment, the world seemed suspended. The fog, the shadows, the whispers, all converging. Thomas' form flickered, half human, half shadow, urging her to see, to remember, to survive. Then came the choice: step through the arch or retreat. The journal pulsed like a heartbeat in her hands, and she realized the truth. The vanishing point was not a place, but a test. Those who walked through would carry the memory of the hollow, its knowledge, its hunger, its darkness. Those who turned back might still leave, but never unchanged. Lila stepped forward, Harris beside her, and together they crossed the threshold. Light, fog, shadow, everything merged. A scream, a whisper, a heartbeat, and then silence. When the fog receded, the clearing was empty. No shadows, no figure, only the forest, patient, eternal, and waiting for the next wanderers. And somewhere deep in Black Hollow Woods, Thomas remembered everything. The forest never sleeps, it never forgives, and it never forgets.
Epilogue: Echoes of the Hollow. The forest never truly ends. Long after Lila and Harris vanished into the vanishing point, Black Hollow Woods stood unchanged, silent, patient, and watching. The fog curled between the trees like fingers, brushing over roots and rocks, whispering secrets to anyone who dared approach. Travelers avoided it. Townsfolk spoke of it only in hushed tones. And yet, the stories lingered. Everyone knew someone who had disappeared, but no one remembered exactly how. Inside the forest, the shadows still moved, stretching and shifting, carrying memories of all who had entered. The marked tree, the whispering stones, the eye in the fog, the hollow's offering, all remained, etched into the consciousness of the woods, resonating with invisible energy. The forest remembered Thomas, and through him, it remembered Lila and Harris, recording their fear, their choices, their fleeting courage. Sometimes, at twilight, the journal appeared near the forest edge, pages fluttering as if reading the wind. Those brave or foolish enough to touch it felt the pull of the hollow immediately, a tug in the mind, a whisper in the ear, visions of the lost, beckoning them to follow the forgotten path. The forest's hunger never rested. It only waited. Lila's and Harris's presence lingered like a faint echo, a memory half-trapped between worlds. They had survived, or perhaps transformed, becoming part of the hollow's eternal narrative. Their thoughts, their fears, and their determination now fueled the forest, weaving into the tapestry of shadows, fog, and whispers. Thomas, long changed, remained at the center, a sentinel and a warning. Yet, despite the terror, the hollow offered something else: knowledge. The forest taught patience, endurance, and the consequences of curiosity. Every visitor left altered, even if they escaped with their flesh intact. Some never returned, becoming whispers themselves, shadows folded into the mist, forever remembered, forever lost. The hollow was a story that never ended. It waited for the next footsteps, the next heartbeat, the next soul daring to wander. And somewhere, deep in the woods, the faint echoes of Thomas's voice could still be heard, interwoven with the rustle of leaves, the ripple of the stream, the subtle pulse of the stones. Remember, or be forgotten. Black Hollow Woods had claimed its history, stitched its victims into its memory, and stood eternal, patient, and relentless. The forest had no beginning, no end, only the endless cycle of curiosity, fear, and survival. And somewhere, beyond the reach of the fog, the hollow waits still, whispering for those who dare to listen.